Welcome to the latest episode of the Blazing Musket podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Pinzone. I'm joined today by the unimpeachable leader of the Blazing Musket, Sam Lattof. Preseason is well underway for the New England Revolution. We know some early round U.S. Open Cup matchups for the teams in New England that are participating right at the first go-around. It includes RIFC, Hartford, and of course, RIFC, Hartford, and Portland are all not necessarily in preseason, but they are rounding off their off-season moves and getting ready to try and, take steps forward from the success that all three teams had last year. Boston Legacy definitively knows where they're playing all of their games, and it appears that only Connecticut United does not know where it is that they'll be playing their soccer in New England in 2026. So we'll see if we can get any updates on that. But again, it's been a pretty busy start to 2026. Sam, you're on here just a month ago. There was a lot to talk about then, and we've seemingly had quite a few developments since then.
Exactly. Great to be back on, Tom. Really do appreciate it, but lots to talk about, whether it's transfers, schedules, upcoming matches. I mean, hey, we might get to talk about a nice blend between motorsport and soccer, if we get to it.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Let's start with that. That was Boston Legacy today. They announced what the Hyundai is going to be their sleeve partner or their sleeve logo sponsor, whatever it's called. And what did they took some of the players on a like onto a racetrack, or what did they do exactly?
Yeah, they filmed, I think, the announcement video that will go out, that will be out by the time that this is out. They filmed it with Leah Block. I believe it's Leah Block, who is the daughter of Ken Block, famous driver, and she's a famous driver in her own right, whether it's in the rally scene or with F1 Academy. I believe she's coming on. You have to edit this in post. I believe she is coming on as an investor for the club. I mean, kudos to Boston Legacy FC. They have really been able to get a lot of interesting names when it comes to the investor group. I think of Caleb Williams, a bunch, you have college athletes. Yes, I am correct. Hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm making you edit this, Thomas. Never mind. She's not part of the ownership group. You have to cut that whole part out. I'm so sorry. Um, but yeah, so as a part of the announcement, they're having Leah Block, obviously the daughter of Ken Block, both famous drivers in their own right. Ken, an amazing drift driver, and as well as other formats, and then Leah, a rally driver, as well as an F1 Academy. So interesting to be able to combine, motorsport and soccer here in New England. Don't really have a lot of motorsport partnerships when it comes to New England soccer teams. And personally, as someone who drives a Hyundai, very excited to see them as a side sleeve sponsor. So I might have to just go to get a kid just for that.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I mean, it really is not much crossover between, car companies in general and teams that are based in New England. We don't have the luxury like Halifax Wanderers has of being sponsored by Volkswagen. But this is a good start. Getting Hyundai is in the racing world as kind of an up and coming auto manufacturer. They have pretty successful Hyundai Elantra N. There's a touring car. They pretty much win every IMSA touring car event that they enter in. So that is pretty cool. We'll have to check out the video as well. You and I, and I'm sure many of our listeners are up for anything that involves a car or vehicle driving really fast around a racetrack. So yeah, so it's pretty rare that a sponsorship comes out that is in any way interesting. I feel like most of it's just kind of run of the mill stuff that's not really too much to get excited about. But yeah, that is at least a little bit of a change of pace there. And we might as well keep talking on with the legacy. The legacy, we do know now definitively where they are playing. What is the split look like between playing down in Tidewater in Rhode Island and then playing in Gillette Stadium?
Yeah, I believe it is a pretty even split. I think when you look at it, you're getting some more of the bigger names. One that stands out for me personally is Martha coming to Gillette Stadium. And also, too, they kind of came out with their announcement that they're going to have all these different theme nights My wife loves K-pop. There's going to be like a K-pop theme night down in Rhode Island for Centerville Bank Stadium. But similar to like what I've been saying, they've really been killing the off the field stuff. Whether it's kind of uh that player recruitment, whether it's the ability to bring in coaches. But there's just obviously that big looming if they would have had White Stadium, the name and all that fiasco. But it seems like there's going to be an even split. I know there is kind of some controversy between season ticket holders from obviously having seats at Gillette. They were able to choose those. It seems like season ticket holders were essentially just given tickets at Centerville Stadium. Some of them, appreciate where they are, and some of them probably don't. So it's going to be interesting to see how that situation kind of resolves itself. Seems like it's going to be a pretty even split. Looking at the calendar too, you're going to have to probably get a few different streaming platforms, whether it's Amazon Prime, CBS Sports. I believe, there's also some games on ESPN, ABC. There's some streaming platform I believe called Velocity. So definitely going to be interesting to see just how people will be able to watch these games. There is still the potential for maybe a local provider to step up. Obviously, with Rhode Island FC, have Nesson. So we'll be interested to see what happens there. But really excited for this team to start playing games. Still got to wait for a jersey to come out, and it sounds like Jackie Contreras, she was at an NWSL Media Day. Sounds like the team is going to be headed to Spain for some preseason as well too, as I believe they're also down in Florida currently at the moment. So going to be really interesting to see just how this team's able to perform on just on the field, because with the talent they have, I think they could really make a splash.
Yeah, I mean, the connection there to Spain, that seems kind of obvious, right? The general manager, whose name I can't pronounce, is from Barcelona, so that makes sense to go over there. I mean, it's a pretty good place to go, just in general for preseason. It's interesting. I had totally forgot about that. Pick your seat event at Gillette Stadium that the Legacy did last fall, and then obviously have kind of had to kind of backtrack and flip that whole thing around because they're not going to be there the whole time. But look, I mean, like you said, it's their first year. I'm sure the season ticket holders that have jumped in, straight away here at the first opportunity are just really excited to see, women's soccer, returning to New England and trying and gain a foothold. So if you get to just kind of make it work for, it's only one season. And, the thing about Centerville too is there aren't really bad seats there. Like, right. I mean, it would be a bit of a challenge to end up in a seat that you're really not happy with. I mean, I don't think like people are going to be like getting stuck on the end zones when they'd rather be on the sideline. Or, I mean, I haven't been there a couple times. I sat the couple times I went there, I was in the highest section you could sit in. But it's still very close. So I think in the end that'll all work out for them. But for sure, and we do need to get Jackie on the show here in the next couple weeks, get us all fully up to speed with everything that's going on with that team and and the NWSL as general. Oh, because I don't know how much you know about the NWSL, but I know very little to nothing at this point. So I could use a good refresher myself.
Yeah, nah. We You could talk with Jackie about the lovely high impact player rule.
Oh, that's right, like the DP sorta kinda thing that they're doing now, and they did that just to keep Trinity Robin in the league more or less.
Yeah, essentially, they should. I mean, if they call it the Trinity Rodman rule, it'd be pretty baller.
Yeah, I mean, they should because it seems to be along the same lines, like, there's this player in this case, a player that we really don't want to leave the league, whereas with Beckham, it was a player that they really wanted to get into the league, but, you know yeah, that makes sense to me. You gotta start somewhere. Women's soccer is definitely growing in Europe, and if those clubs have money to throw around, or if they want to start throwing money around, then NWSL is going to have to really kind of counter that. Whereas, I think for a while, especially for U.S. women's national team, that wasn't too much of a temptation to go abroad because you could stay here and it was on good money. So yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, and I'm sure Jackie again has a lot more knowledge than the two of us about how all that stuff has worked out. But Sam, a little bit more in my wheelhouse and your wheelhouse is the New England Revolution, the other occupants of Gillette Stadium. Are they? How are they looking? Are they going to be able to match their, the team that they share the stadium with, and make a run all the way to the end of the season?
Don't know if they'll match the Patriots, and I have to say, are they also the other team? Because obviously you have Revs too as well too. You can't forget about
Yeah,
them, Thomas.
Revs too. Yeah,
Um, but we'll be interesting to see how the Revs do. I mean, personally, I think the vibes around the team are high, and there's some positivity in the air. I was able to participate in my first press conference with Marko Mitrovic, and hearing him talk, he's a guy saying all the right things, talking about how even though we're seeing great performances from someone like Leo Campana, it is still just the preseason, how he's really not trying to confine players to a system. It's just kind of a desire of how he wants a team to play, kind of allowing some freedom, it seems, trying and rather than confine players to a certain style of play. And I think really when you look at kind of the performances, again, we don't get to watch these games, but the fact that Leo Campana scored, 3 goals in 3 games is promising considering, his performance in 2025. Um, you're bringing back Carlos Heel, just signed a contract extension that will have him, take locked up for the first MLS season that goes from summer to spring, which is very crucial for the team, locking him up. Key player, still one of the best midfielders in MLS even at his age, and it seems like we're getting closer and closer to it being not where's Carlos going to end his career, but when is he essentially going to end his career, in a Revolution uniform? Because I believe he's 32, 33 right now. I think he'll be about 35, 36 when the contract expires. That's getting up there. The light at the end of the tunnel is shining brighter. So, um, again, just really interested to see how this team performs. Seems like this team is slated to do better. I know Matt Doyle and the Soccer Wise guys, David Gauss and Tom Bogart kind of did some over unders, and I think Matthew Doyle joked, and the Soccer Wise guys joked that the Revs will probably get 15 more points, just because they won't have Caleb Porter as their head coach. So I feel like the bar is extremely low. I think for the Revolution fans, making the playoffs should be the bar. I think you can't miss out on the playoffs again. So as long as you make the playoffs, I would say even if you get out in the first round, you should be happy with that. That would be progress. You're going to be developing young players. So all in all, excited for this Revolution season, which I can't say, I have been in recent years. So excited to, see what this team is capable of doing, once the matches start to matter, if you will.
yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, I don't think you have to look too much further than teams that had a new coach in the Eastern Conference last year to kind of get an idea of okay, what is possible. PJ Callahan came into Nashville, and they were a top one of the top teams in the conference. Philadelphia obviously bounced back in a big way after moving on from the coach that every team in MLS then wanted to hire immediately after. So they bounced back and had a strong season. So it's certainly it's doable. I think it was 4, maybe 5 teams last year that had new coaches that were able to make the playoffs. Toronto, I think, was one of the outliers there where had a new coach, but they had a lot of other issues with the baggage from the Italian DPs that kind of held them back. So it's possible. I mean, I think playoffs has got to be the minimum expectation. And I mean, look, if some of these young guys that they brought in, if they click, if they if they get on terms with what Mitrovic is trying to do, and obviously he's bringing these guys in because he's coached them before, he knows them. So and he's bringing in guys that he's coached before that are not over the hill at 27 years old or are in their mid 30s and are kind of hanging on to the end of their career. These guys are young still. All the guys that you brought in are under the age of 23. So I think there's a little bit of excitement there. And the latest signing out of all these guys is Griffin Yao, which to me, first of all of a sudden, the Revs need wingers again. They moved on from a couple. Jack Piniutu looks like he's going to not get an opportunity to break through with the team for yet another year. So he's going to go back out on loan. So all of a sudden you have a team that really Luca Langoni was their only winger. But then Griffin Yao arrived, just in the last, I think the last like week and a half. So, how do people feel about Griffin Yao?
Yeah, Yao was a signing I was really excited by. Someone who kind of came up for the DC Academy, then went off to Europe with Westerlo. I think it's a chance for him to maybe get some more consistent minutes. I mean, you can maybe make the comparison between MLS and Belgium. I think, some people might say that MLS is kind of growing to be a better league. Obviously, when you look at Belgium, you got Bruges. I'm now going to forget every single club that's in Belgium, but there is like three or four clubs in Belgium that are pretty good. But I think, once you kind of get off that, it can be similar to other leagues that kind of drop in quality. But I think he can be a really interesting player. And, talking with Marco Mitrovic, I believe it was Seth Maycomber who asked them just kind of about getting these young players. Mitrovic stressed that he's not just getting young players for the sake of getting younger. He believes that these players can make an impact right away. I mean, Griffin, yeah, he's probably going to be someone who starts right away. Brooklyn Reigns, I would probably say the same thing. Ethan Kohler may be a little bit more difficult, but especially if you lose someone like Peyton Miller, I think you're going to have, starting outside backs of Eli Feingold and Ethan Kohler. Kohler's also someone you can slide in at center back. So I think you're going to see these young players get minutes, and maybe that gives some hope to Jack Peniotto out on loan at Loudoun United. Maybe that gives guys like Malcolm Fry, Cristiano Alvera hope that they can actually get minutes, not just kind of sit on the bench or play with Revs too. So really excited. Yao was a signing that kind of really stood out to me. A lot of people are high on Brooklyn Reigns, and I think maybe I'm just more concerned about the amount of money that was spent on him. But I will defer to the experts, who are really high on Brooklyn Reigns, and Ethan Kohler. I think kind of gets the Wolfsburg and Bundesliga bump, but it'll be interesting to see his role of this squad. But you know, the Revs are getting younger, but they're going to be using these players, which I think will be great for fans who, everyone enjoys seeing the kids get a chance to play, but also too, you have to win those games. And I think, when you got guys like Yao, I think, you can definitely be competing. But like you said, winger, with the departure of Chocolate, you essentially have Langoni, uh, Yao, and I would probably say like Malcolm Fry, which no offense to Malcolm Fry, but I think you definitely need some depth there. So will be interesting again, in that same question, Seth Maycomber asked if there could be more moves, and Mitrovic kind of gave the typical coach or front office speech. They're always looking for moves. I would imagine they're looking for wingers, just more for depth, unless they really think that they can elevate someone from Revs too. But I think you have to get maybe a veteran or just maybe someone with MLS experience to kind of round out that squad. But again, lots of good things to talk about with the Revolution, which, can't exactly be said for recent seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think maybe a third striker, for the first time in 3 or 4 years might be a good idea. Yeah, like you said, yeah, a little bit more depth at winger, one way or another. Whether it's maybe moving a player that's already on the team out there, or someone from Revs too, or trying to go out and find another Ima Boateng type player, right? A veteran player. They can come off the bench, 20, 25 times for 20, 25 minutes and, pop up with some goals and some assists. I think that's it doesn't seem like they're missing all that much, beyond the starting 11. They've maybe got some depth at outside back, uh, you know, three center backs deep. I guess some people would think that Tanner Beeson would make them four center backs deep, but that's dubious. Central midfield, they seem like they have a ton of center mids, which is great. For those of us that look forward to the eventual, Matt Polster doesn't really play anymore phase of being a Revs fan. By the way, that it doesn't seem like it's going to happen once again this year. Like, right? They did some interviews the other day, and it was the head coach, Kyle Sill, captain of the team, best player. Both make sense.
The
And
signed
then
contract extension?
sign a contract extension, right? And then Matt Polster was the other guy that talked yesterday. Like, have you got any, like, do I have to like gear up now for another year of Matt Polster as a starting central midfielder for an MLS team that wants to be good?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I think when, you think of Brooklyn Reigns, Alisson Yusuf, I mean, I would imagine those guys would probably be your starters considering how much money you spent to go get someone like Brooklyn Reigns. And I mean, if I'm looking at Alisson Yusuf or Matt Polster, I'd probably go Alisson Yusuf. Alan Oyerwoff, I think, is still a little bit raw. Still want to try and develop him. It was interesting. I think you'll appreciate this, Tom. Seth, this is going to be the Seth McComber asks X episode. But he asked Polster, and he kind of joked. He's like, "I'll try and ask this politely, but like, there's a lot of young players, and you're now this older guy." And I think it really gets to the point of like, you have Yusuf, you have Reigns, like it seems like he's primed for maybe that bench role coming off the bench. I think partially, why we see him in pressers is he's someone that you can trust to, give a good quote, but not, maybe, stick his foot in his mouth. So, that's just, PR and, that's
Yeah.
just, what clubs do.
Yeah.
But when I look at the talent on the team, I think it's essentially going to come down to a toss up between Matt Polster and Alisson Yusuf. And personally, I'd give it to Yusuf.
Yeah. Yeah, Pulser's pretty good at towing the company line, so it's not really surprising to roll him out there. But yeah, I mean, Reigns, as far as his range of his technical ability, he seems like a player that certainly has a lot of potential. I know he gets some criticism with his safe passing, statistics and that sort of thing, and being risk averse. But that team, the Houston team that he was playing on, was a very risk averse team as a whole. So it's not for me. It's more, what is he what is he capable of if he's asked to be playing in a more progressive way to take more chances? I think is his skill set. I think the skill set is really there for him to be more of that risk taking type player. Just had to get away from a team that was, again, I watched a couple of Houston games. I mean, they're very, very risk averse. I mean, just, it, you know, the, in the words of Roy Keane, they bore you to death. They would, but yeah. So it'd be interesting to see how that all works out. But again, it's nice to be optimistic and excited about the Revs, and for sure, hopefully they come through, because we've been saying this quite a bit, but they are not the only team in New England playing soccer at the professional level. They have a lot of competition these days, and so I think they really are hopefully realizing that, and they need to step it up. And maybe we could have a season where all the pro teams in New England all find a way to make the playoffs. And that's the other thing too. Patriots back in the Super Bowl. The Celtics are supposed to be in a rebuilding year, and they're one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference anyway. They just made a big trade today. Bruins always seem to find a way into the playoffs. The Red Sox were a playoff team last year, so that's kind of the tough part about being in Boston is, all the teams around here tend to be pretty good, and you get left behind, fairly easily. All right, so moving on. Speaking of some of these other teams, the U.S. Open Cup is really the first competition that really gets going and has immediate games of consequence, right? Knockout style games straight away in the month of March, which I really enjoyed last year. Kind of coincides nicely with the NCAA men's basketball tournament. So what matchups do we? Well, we have the matchup to look forward to in the U.S. Open Cup, and then what else do we have to look forward to as well?
Yes, as you mentioned, the matchup is Vermont Green versus Portland Hearts of Pine. On the United Green podcast, I maybe coined it social media FC versus merch FC. It's going to be a great game, great atmosphere. It's a little disappointing. No Nathan Messer making his return. According to Joe Lowry, I don't think it's become official yet, but according to Joe Lowry, back healed, he has been transferred to USL Championship side Charleston Battery. That's a really big move for him. He's someone who
Yeah,
was with Rhode Island FC, but didn't really get a ton of playing time. This is his kind of chance to show, he can be a USL Championship player. But you really have the two darlings, I would almost say, of New England soccer, especially northern New England soccer. Vermont Green coming off the championship season, Portland Hearts of Pine having, record-breaking season in terms of attendance, merch numbers, and, almost winning a championship. So, it's going to be a great game, I think. Vermont does have experience knocking off League One competition. They did beat Lexington SC in the U.S. Open Cup, then ended up losing to MLS Next Pro side, Carolina Core. But it's going to be a, great atmosphere. Sounds like, a lot of Portland fans, might be congregating up on that hill that has become so famous, at Virtue Field. But just imagine it, St. Patrick's Day, I believe it's on. Um, there'll be corned beef hash allegedly, and allegedly a Guinness keg, Tom. So if that's your vibe,
Wow,
you know,
zero
make sure.
gravity is gonna
No, 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 not zero gravity.
they're gonna
That's
let that
just a
happen.
faithful Vermont fan, pulling that out. So you know the vibes will be great, and I mean, if there's snow, there was snow at the, um, I think both of the games, maybe just one of the games. I think it might have been one of the games, just Carolina Core. But if we could get a snow game between Portland and Vermont, that would be absolute scenes. But I will stop gushing over that match, and we'll go down to what I would say is the next level for New England soccer fans, which is Rhode Island FC versus CD Filons. I'm so sorry for butchering the Portuguese there, but essentially another amateur side has experience in the Open Cup as of late. Going up against I believe Portland Hearts of Pine. Going to be interesting to see how they play in Rhode Island. Obviously, that's a game that Rhode Island should be winning. But these are just the matches you love to see. Professional sides going up against amateur sides. These players getting to go into an environment like Centerville Bank Stadium. I remember the stories correctly. I know a lot of people have talked to them, including Seth Macomber. It's this Portuguese club, and like after games or stuff, they'll congregate with people who were from the team beforehand, and it's a really great environment. So, best of luck to them. Then finally, because Hartford continuing a tradition of Connecticut being just seen of not being in New England, they're playing FC Motown of not New England, New Jersey. So going to be interesting to see how that matchup goes. FC Motown was a team who was kind of, in the USL League Two playoffs up there in Vermont. So we'll be interesting to see how they test Hartford Athletic. But again, Hartford Athletic should be winning that match. Would be a massive upset if Motown was able to get the win. But it's great to see these amateur sides going up against pro sides, potentially getting some cup sets. So it'll be a great atmosphere, I think, too, for, Hartford Athletic fans, getting to see their team play in a little bit of a more unique and probably cozy atmosphere. But really excited for the U.S. Open Cup, a great tournament. The Revolution will be in as well. So it's going to be great to see all these New England teams go up against one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing too about Portland and the Vermont Green is not just how well thought of they are in New England, but they really kind of set the standard for their respective leagues across the country. I've heard a couple of different organizations that have gone on morning kick around in USL2, and they've talked about the Vermont Green has really kind of set the standard of what's possible with the League Two team, and that's kind of like we want to, if we could be 4/5 of what those guys are, we'll really be flying and be on our way. And then, we've talked about this many times on the show. Portland, their merch, they sold basically every single ticket that they could possibly sell last year. They would be, a middle of the pack in terms of attendance in the championship, which is the next league up. So I think it is, it'd be great if they could find some excuse to play each other every year, to be honest. If they don't get the U.S. Open Cup matchup, maybe try and come up with some sort of, annual game between the two of them. Because like you said, the fan bases are both fantastic. And, maybe they could take it in turns where one year they go to Portland, one year they go to Vermont. But that definitely has the potential to be a really special game. And if you are up there, and if you are looking for something like a Guinness isn't quite Guinness, Zero Gravity does have their own Guinness style beer, which I can strongly recommend. It is delicious, comes in a 16-ounce can, and it's a very fitting can design for St. Patrick's Day. So you can go the traditional route and have Guinness if that's your thing. But of course, don't forget all of the great offerings from Zero Gravity. So free plug there for Zero Gravity, who does
Can
not.
Zero Gravity please sponsor? You don't have to sponsor the site, just sponsor the pod. I
I
mean,
just sponsor the
Thomas.
pod. No problem.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just finished one not more than a couple minutes ago. So
essentially, just send Tom and I a case, and like that will be the payment.
yeah, send us a case. Look, I can cut the promo. I don't need a script. I can do it all myself. It's no problem. And yeah, we'll see, Sam. We'll see. We'll see how that game goes. We'll see if Zero Gravity wants to come through and just ship some beer down to us here to enjoy. But Let's see, what else do we have? By the way, Motown, by the way, yeah, I got thrown off last year when I was doing the US Open Cup first round recap by FC Motown. I assumed that they were in Detroit, but it turns out they are not. They are in New Jersey. Bit of an odd journey the US Open Cup can take you on. Now, I also last year thought that Little Rock was not in Arkansas for about a solid week. I was writing
Hey, to be fair, the editor, aka me, just did not catch it. So
was convinced that they were in Alabama for like 5 days. And then it dawned on me, oh no, they're not. They're
there's definitely a Little Rock in Alabama. Whether it's a literal Little Rock
yeah,
or
I mean,
a
I'm
town.
sure there are. Yeah. Yeah. Rocks of small size or large pebbles that are they're located somewhere. Oh, what a flub that was. Anyway, we move on. We're all humans. We all make mistakes from time to time. So look, so we talked a little bit about RIFC Hartford and Portland, their U.S. Open Cup matches. But how are things looking for them in terms of putting their rosters together? RIFC seems like they've had a pretty good amount of turnover. Are they going to be able to put something together for their third year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, I would say probably the two biggest moves is departures in terms of Albert Dikwa and Matthew Rodriguez leaving. Those deals largely they just didn't work out. Dikwa was pretty inconsistent, and Maxi just didn't really seem to fit the system. Um, Seems like Rhode Island's really found its players that it can rely on. Think a guy like JJ Williams could really be poised for a breakout season if he's able to perform well. Koke Vegas, very reliable. I would say more defensively, they seemed really locked down. I would say probably midfield and attack is where questions might start to arise. Um, I think it's gonna be really interesting. I don't know if they'll come out and immediately light things up. But they definitely seem like they can be a playoff contending team. And out of the teams that you mentioned, I think probably the most impacted team has to be Portland Hearts of Pine with the loss of Nathan Messer. I mean, they have some guys on that team, Mo Muhammad, Jaden Jones Riley will be, coming back from injury. They also, brought in a few players, Zion Scarlett's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I believe Esteban Espinoza is also a player who can play out wide. But Messer balled out last year, and his ability to get forward, but also be a good defender. It's going to be really tough to replace. So I think Portland did make a signing today, but I believe it wasn't really associated. I believe it was forward, if I'm correct. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond and maybe play those first few games. And Hartford, they did make some interesting signings. Obviously signing that Irish midfielder, Irish attacker who looks like he could be poised to make an impact. Lost Jack Peniotu, who obviously went for Loudoun United, and also got Augustine Williams, who's kind of been a prolific goal scorer in terms of the amount of goals he scored. But as Oliver Scholes wrote, maybe that's just because he's been playing in the league so long. But I think being able to potentially replace someone like Mamadou Dieng and be able to add to a team that was able to win a trophy is obviously a good thing. Lots of additions. I think maybe for Rhode Island FC was addition by subtraction. Um, but if I look at all these teams, I think Hartford Athletic, I think can definitely will be in playoff contention. Rhode Island FC doing the same. And I would say just based on, the minimal amount of teams in USL 1, that Portland Hearts of Pine should probably be poised, especially of all the people they brought back, even though they lost Messer, should be poised to be, I would argue, a top team in USL League 1. So I think there could be lots of success in New England again in 2026.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, we saw that Rhode Island FC. They seem to just kind of get better as the year goes on for a couple of years in a row now. Uh, you know, Hartford has, arguably has the longest period of stability that the club's ever had in terms of the head coach and some of the players. So really cutting down on that turnover and then having success. It'll be interesting to see, how that goes. It's all I find that enjoyable to kind of see when a coach is really able to settle in, has a core of players that he's been able to bring back for 2 or 3 years. what can they really do? Can they start to explore, different ways of playing? Can they really kind of continue to push on? And again, for Hartford, they've literally they've never had this. This is a new situation for them. The same coach going into year three off the back of a successful season. I mean, that's not like a thing that really happens. Rhode Island FC only ever knows having one coach going into their third season, but I think it's nice to see that they've been able to identify, and he's really been there for 4 years because he was there working, putting the team together for, I think it was almost 9 months before they even started playing. Already, it's kind of crazy. I think that Rhode Island is already going into their third season, and Connor Smith is already coming up on his on 4 years with the organization, and then Portland. Again, such a fantastic start last year, just all around. It'll be interesting to see, how repeatable is that in a USL League One that is not really, it's not the stablest of leagues. There are teams coming and going, players, there's just so much kind of turnover, and it'll be interesting to see, what they can do up there. But I don't really think you could say any one of those teams is in a bad position going into the year. I'm sure they're all pretty happy with where they're at.
Yeah, and just because it just finally came to my mind, there was a big signing by Rhode Island FC, in my opinion, Leo Afonso, Brazilian forward, someone who kind of came up through Atlanta United system. He's someone to keep an eye on. I think, he can make an impact. They also signed a former Charlotte FC kind of defender. But Leo Afonso, Matt Enschken wrote a great article on him. Really interested to see how he can perform at Rhode Island FC.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When they signed Deco before their first season, people took that as, a real big statement of intent. He was, he was the league's leading scorer. So, an expansion team goes out and signs the leading goal scorer from the previous year. That that was a bit of a late move as well. They'd already seemingly put together a pretty good team, and then they dropped that on everybody. And then they followed that up last year with Maxi Rodriguez, which I thought was for sure that was going to be a great signing. It was a no brainer. He's going to be able to, open things up, create chances. I mean, is there anything like that stands out to you? Like why, two guys 2 years in a row that looked like for sure they were going to come in and have a big impact. And then this past offseason, they've moved on from both of them.
I think Maxi Rodriguez is essentially just he didn't fit Connor Smith's system. I just think he's some guy who really wants a free flowing role, kind of being able to do his stuff. And I think in Connor Smith's system, that player doesn't exactly fit. I mean, I think with Dequa is just kind of inconsistency, if anything. I don't know if it was a system thing like with Maxi. I just think he really struggled for consistency. Maybe he was kind of, making this new move, kind of going to a new side and new pastures. But I would think it was more inconsistency there. But I'd definitely say with Maxi Rodriguez, it was just a system fit. And I think going back to Detroit is probably a great move for him.
Yeah, well, Detroit looked pretty lost without him as well, too. I mean, they really struggled to score goals, create chances. I mean, they had a 7 or 8 week stretch through the summer where, I mean, they just, they looked like they were never going to score a goal ever again, to be honest. So sometimes it's always funny how sometimes, the really talented player that's been dominant in that league just moves from one team to another, and that has such a huge effect. I think that's maybe more unique to soccer than it is to some other sports. I mean, if you're a basketball player, if if you can drop 20-10 and 5, you can drop 20-10 and 5 on a lot of different teams. Yeah. So yeah, it's exciting though. Like I said, those teams were all in pretty good places. The Revs are hopefully headed back in the right direction as well. But what about Connecticut United? Have a schedule of sorts. They know that they are going to be playing games. They have signed. I mean, it does seem like this is going to happen. But apparently they still don't exactly know, or we don't know, where these home games are going to be taking place.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver Scholes and definitely does not have faith that they will actually play games. But I mean, they've signed some really good players. Like again, Anthony Ramos, a goalkeeper, from Club America. I mean, former MLS Next Pro champions. Like they've gone out and gotten the talent, and just announced their coaching staff recently, full coaching staff. So it's going to be interesting. Same thing with preseason. They announced their fixtures, but no idea when they're going to be played. No idea where they're going to be played. And obviously because American soccer, we're going to have no idea what happened in the games. They're not going to be streamed or anything. So I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes and what kind of fan cultivation they're going to have. You look at Revs 2, obviously, and really have struggled to do that. Playing down in Bryant this upcoming season will be interesting to see if they can maybe attract more eyes there, especially seeing that it's not in Massachusetts where they've typically played. But I'm really interested to see how Connecticut United does because I think no matter if they play at different places, like with the roster they have, they definitely could compete. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they perform, and there's a potential they even, perform better than Revs 2. And I think getting to see Revs 2 go up against them would be very interesting. Connecticut United actually signed Alex Amonis, who used to play for Revs 2. So definitely could be some great matchups there, but there's so many questions with Connecticut United heading into the year that it is hard to imagine, but like I think they're going to play soccer, which is good for them.
I mean, they've certainly convinced a number of players that they will in fact be playing soccer this year, and half the time it'll be somewhere in Connecticut. Yeah, but yeah, I think that the model of being an independent team in a league that is mostly teams associated with a bigger club, right? So it's they're all professionals, right? It's not necessarily a developmental league, but that is what a lot of teams. That's what it's there for. I mean, that's what Revs 2 is there for, or Rebels 2, or all the other twos. But there's a handful of teams now that are in this league that are, well, we're not necessarily developing players for anybody else, or guys are they're not going to get called up mid-season. So you have to think that's going to give them a competitive advantage to have a consistent, like we're going to have a consistent roster throughout the season. Right? We're not going to get told, hey, this guy needs to get 30 minutes, this guy needs to get 30 minutes, or you can't play this guy because we might need him midweek. All these considerations that the second teams have to take, where they're to a certain extent they're taking orders from an organization that doesn't have them winning a competitive game. That's not the foremost thought in their mind. So I would think these independent teams that have decided to jump into MLS Next Pro for whatever reason, they should have a pretty big competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I think with Connecticut United too, they've really been able to go out and get some players with international experience, which I think is, definitely maybe giving them a leg up. Don't necessarily, I'm not familiar with MLS Next Pro's roster rules and how it maybe differs compared to, traditional MLS roster rules, but seemingly with the kind of amount of international talent they have, maybe it's not as strict on terms of international players versus domestic players. And I think kind of too, another key point is that obviously when you're developing players for the first team, it would help if you play a similar system. I think when you're an independent side, you can play whatever system you want. You can adjust your system. So there's definitely, like you said, that flexibility. So again, I wouldn't be shocked if Connecticut United definitely, has a much better start than some people might think.
Yeah, yeah. So, and there's just a lot of questions around, where and how they're going to get this done on the field. But yeah, for sure. Hey, look, I mean, you can really say New England, it kind of has one of everything, right? They have a team in, USL 1, 2 in the championship, bunch of USL 2 teams. They have NWSL team and MLS team. And now they have both types of MLS Next Pro teams. So you've got, kind of got the full slate of teams to choose from. Um, oh, yeah. Apparently James Rodriguez is still alive. I was not really aware.
He was alive. I knew he was alive. I can't
I have
say
my
that.
doubts. Uh, so where has he allegedly all this is just today. He has surfaced. I don't know where he's been for many, many years, but he's gonna be coming to MLS.
Yes, it's actually very funny. I don't know if Tom Bogart addressed this, but rumors kind of started popping up. They weren't exactly from any like legitimate sources, if you will. And so like Tom Bogart would come out with like these posts being like, I have not heard that James Rodriguez is coming to MLS. He was the one to report that James Rodriguez is now coming to MLS. Obviously, things change. As it seems like he's a player who wants to make sure he gets minutes heading into the World Cup to make the World Cup roster. But a really interesting signing. I think obviously, if he was able to come a little bit more not in retirement age, it would be great for MLS. But he's still a very talented player, and I think Minnesota is rumored to be acquiring him. I believe not a DP deal. So it's going to be a big signing for them. They've kind of had
He's
some.
not a DP.
Oh, I believe not a DP according to Tom Bogart. So um, again, I think Minnesota might have had the advantage of he just desperately needs a team to play for. And needs minutes heading into the World Cup, so maybe they had some leverage there. But Minnesota's had kind of up and down luck when it comes to kind of the South American talent they've been able to bring in. But until they sold Tani Aloezu, like they were going to be one of the top teams in the West, but then they ended up selling him off and kind of smothered their season out. But I think even at his age, James Rodriguez is going to be a great player for them, and he'll have to deal with the cold in Minnesota, but once it starts getting sunny out, he could really be a great player for them, and even in the cold as well. So really interesting to see him come in the league, and obviously MLS, the league and entity, will love to have another star player tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, Ice will be out of Minnesota soon enough anyway. So,
I
the
mean, hey, bro, I
once
forget who wrote the story,
once they
so
all fuck
apologies.
off, it'll be much nicer there.
Yes, I forget who wrote the story out of Minnesota, but they were talking with Minnesota players. One of them's like, "Yeah, I have to carry my passport and all my like documents because now when I'm out at the you know running errands because
Anywhere.
of fear of ICE." And like
Yeah.
it was reported they had 3 European players that they were going after for transfers, and essentially it kind of got down to it, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't wanna go here because of everything that's going on." And I think when you have these world events, again, we live in a world that tries to separate sports and politics. Um, these incidents have ramifications, and the USA doesn't live in a bubble. Like, what happens here affects other places, and when it comes to sports, especially a sport like soccer, you have international talent coming here, having to deal with legal paperwork and, carrying documents. When you have a travesty like what happened in Minnesota, that's going to have ramifications. You had out west with San Francisco Giants, a South Korean player, forgetting a document and getting detained by immigration. It's absolutely insane. Like I know people who now carry their legal documents, carry passports out of fear in Massachusetts, in New England, because of ICE. And gonna have a story on the Blazing Musket about some of the work that's being done in the soccer community in Portland. And unfortunately, I had to touch on, what was going on in Portland and, Portland soccer players who have been kidnapped by ICE. And, we're going into a Super Bowl weekend where ICE is reportedly going to be out and about at the Super Bowl when you have a player from Puerto Rico, which, mind you, is in the United States, but has a large following in Latin America. And there's fears of people being ending up getting deported because of going to the Super Bowl. And Bad Bunny mentioned that he was kind of fearful of that, and it's the reason his whole tour recently was outside the United States. So I mean it sucks. And like thinking of the World Cup, what it could look like there. You have all these kind of nations coming to the United States. Um, obviously it's been marketed that they're going to have, an expedited immigration and visa process. But, even for, people from those nations that reside here, they're going to be fearful because ICE is probably going to be at the stadium. So, I mean, it just sucks. I can't say much more than that. Like, it's just a terrible situation.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. There's no better way to put it. It's really it's really shameful, the actions that some people or many people have been taking, that they think is in some way beneficial to this country when it is the complete and total opposite. The only thing that has been, the only positive thing that is for me has come out of this is we've seen a lot of solidarity in communities up in Portland and other parts of Maine. The state of Minnesota has shown out in a big way. There's been rallies, across the country. There's some down here in Boston, Massachusetts. So there are I it's hard to think this way sometimes, but I do believe that there are more genuinely good people that really cannot stand for some of the shit that ICE has been doing for almost a year now. I really do think there are more people in this country that don't want this to be that type of country, that want it to be this way. And again, so really, again, just it's been encouraging to see these signs of standing up and sticking together, because it is, it's a very dangerous time to do something as simple as walk down the street with your cell phone out. Uh, that apparently can lead to you getting shot in the head. It's.
Yeah, no, and I mean, even to localize it to New England, soccer, you had Portland Hearts of Pine come out with a statement. I know their supporters group was not happy about it, didn't think it was strong enough. Their supporters group came out with a statement that was very strong in its language. And also, we saw Vermont Green come out with probably, I would say, the best statement for ranking statements about, terrible crimes happening. But, Vermont Green came out with a very strong statement as well. It's great to see that. I mean, I'm a political science minor, so I'm happy to see civic engagement up. Hopefully that will continue. I know my sister was up in Vermont. There was protests there as well. She participated in those. So hopefully this prompts more civic engagement and civic involvement. But it's terrible that tragedy and atrocities have to take place for that to happen. But like you said, it's there is some hope out there, and we're seeing people step up and rise to the occasion, if you will, and like that you mentioned, that solidarity and that kind of feeling of community, it is great to see, and hopefully we just continue to see it.
Yeah, and look, I know, some Portland fans, would have preferred the club to put out a more strongly worded statement. I get that, but there's a lot. There's just a lot that goes into even being able to put that type of statement out in the first place. And look, I can understand not being happy that it wasn't worded as strongly as people may have liked. But to those people, I would say, well, you can look at some of the other clubs in New England, and there is no statement, and there will be no statement. The New England Revolution will be putting out anything like that. They're more than happy to just kind of remain silent on these types of things. So yeah, did Portland put out the strongest possible statement that they could put out? No, but they did put one out, and it was supportive of people that don't want to put up with this type of shit. And if you're a Revs fan, I wouldn't be looking for that press release to be coming out of Gillette Stadium anytime soon. That's for sure. So at least you do have a club, and Vermont Green as well. At least you do have a club that is willing to put something on the line. Maybe, God forbid, lose a couple ticket sales. Of course, Portland can afford to lose a couple ticket sales by putting out a statement that everybody might not like. So, the Revs, they got to work really hard for those season ticket memberships. So maybe they're not able to. But yeah. All right, Sam, last thing here, just round off on the politics section of the show. Mauricio Pochettino, very bizarrely, said that Timothy Weah shouldn't be commenting about the average person's inability to afford attending the World Cup in the country of which Timothy Weah is going to be playing for. Look, I like Poch as a coach, or I at least like the coach that he was a long time ago in Southampton, not the one that he's kind of morphed himself into now. But that happens when you go to Tottenham. But this whole, Timothy Weah should just shut up and dribble thing that he came out and said, what, like, is Poch not aware of ticket prices to the World Cup? Is that maybe gave him a little bit of let him off the hook here, that maybe he just doesn't know how obscene the prices are?
I don't know, man, because I was really shocked when I saw it, and I mean, I'm not the biggest, but yeah, because Tim Way is at Olympic Marseille, and as a former PSG fan, I was just instilled with don't root for Olympic Marseille guys, but I mean, Tim Way has a very valid point. He's someone who was born in New York, and I think grew up there, and when you look at the World Cup, I mean, the ticket prices are absolutely insane, and I don't think it's necessarily political to be like, "Hey,
Tickets are
something's
expensive.
expensive." Yeah, so, I don't think it's a political statement. I think maybe you're showing your cards if you're saying it is one. But it's also just extremely hypocritical for Mauricio Pochettino, who will gladly talk about politics in his own country, and I would dare say he talks about politics in the United States, maybe more indirectly. I mean, he's been photographed with the president. Seems willing to cozy up to him, if you will, whether it's at the FIFA awards, and Donald Trump is somehow getting a peace prize. The most peaceful man. Nothing unpeaceful has happened under Donald Trump's eye.
Yeah.
Um,
Eight and a
but
quarter wars, Sam. 8 and a quarter wars ended.
eight and a quarter. How do you end a quarter of a war?
Well,
Or
it
how is
was
free force of a war still going on?
it was gonna start, but I stopped it. So technically, it's a quarter.
There you go. You're right.
It's a
You're right.
quarter
But
war.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I do think there's like obviously that point of like you want a player to just be focused on the game, but also when you're at that point, players do have a voice and you have a platform. And I mean, looking elsewhere, you have WNBA players in Minnesota standing up against ICE. You had Victor Wembanyama being asked, about these things. You have different celebrities being asked, and maybe, again, celebrities, athletes, they're not like maybe exactly who you should be looking for in terms of how you direct your moral compass or how you come to decisions on politics or human rights things. But when you have a platform and you're willing to use it, that's obviously something that should be commended. And I think Tim Weah sticking up for soccer fans and a sport that's traditionally been for the lower middle class is something to be commended. And I don't think he said anything that was, like, terrible. I think he's like, "Yeah, it would be great if tickets were, like, less expensive." He wasn't like, "I think FIFA is the worst organization in the world." So
I
it
mean,
was really strange to see.
yeah, I mean, he didn't like come out against capitalism. I mean, like he just said the tickets are obscenely priced, and it's a really difficult situation for a lot of people, and I'm sure he wishes it wasn't that way. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say, and it's really not political at all. I don't know what not you'd have to twist yourself into to call that a political, statement that, I mean, it's yeah. I just thought that was very bizarre. I mean, I get it. U.S. soccer has a role to play in all this over commercialized, over expensified world that we live in, and U.S. soccer and FIFA is they're happy to live in it, and they're happy to drive it further in that direction as they have been, going on. Well, for FIFA since since the early '70s, they saw the ability to commercialize and just capitalize on every single thing they can capitalize on, and that's probably the best thing that they've done is they've just found more and more ways to make money. But you're right, this game grew into the game that it is across the world because poor, lower middle class people really took to it. This used to be something that you could afford to watch. This used to be something that you could afford to play. You just needed a field and somebody had to turn up with a ball and you could find a couple rocks to mark out goals. Like, it's supposed to be an inexpensive game to be a part of, but that is not the case whether you want to play or whether you want to watch. So yeah, I feel bad for Weah there, kind of getting whacked by the national team coach for a little bit of nonsense because Poch is just trying to, I think he's trying to toe the company line just a little too hard. They
Yeah, I mean, you look at the World Cup, and I mean, obviously, like this has been something that, like, especially here in the United States, like people have really been looking forward to. But I'll just speak for myself, finding it real hard to want to root for the United States. I mean, I hope they do well. I hope they have a good showing. But I know there's some jersey leaks out there. Don't exactly know if I'm going to be going out to buy a USA jersey at this current time in history. Might catch me in a South Korea jersey.
Yeah, it's a tough time to be big about being an American. Yeah, because there's certainly a lot more negativity getting projected out there than positivity. But again, like I said, look, there are, there are a lot of people out there that are showing on a daily, weekly basis that that we can still, push for a country that doesn't do some of the disgusting things that we've been doing over the last year. But we sort of seem a long way away from that. But yeah, this World Cup was supposed to be this incredible, great, amazing thing. But for a variety of reasons, yeah, the shine has definitely been taken off of it for a lot of us. So to, just kind of have to see what happens come this summer.
Almost forgot, Tom, by the way. The Athletic reported this, Paul Tenorio, I think it's out in LA, $300 for parking.
Well,
You
now,
could
but
pay more than a ticket.
well, no, now see that's the thing, Sam. If the ticket costs $1,500, then $300 for parking. You have to keep these things in ratio, right? You have to make it look like, well, everything is more expensive, right? The tickets are $1,500, the parking's $300, the beer is $30. It, people might start getting suspicious if you get parked for $25, but the ticket costs $1,500. People might get
God
wise
forbid you
to,
can park for three, Tom.
yeah, no, not in this country, no. You can't park for free. Look, I'll tell you some places you can't park for free. You can park for free at UVM. So you make your way up there for a game. You can park for free at Gillette Stadium. You have to pay to park at Hartford, but it's not much. It's pretty cheap, and it's right across the streets. Yeah,
And in Portland, unless you somehow find street parking.
yeah. I found street parking.
Buddy, I did not.
No, I take that back. We parked in a garage, and I think we got out
I
without.
did too.
I think we got out without paying. So we owe
I
the.
also may or may not have gotten a $60 ticket for not parking in a place I shouldn't.
Well, you do what you got to do to work for the Blazing Musket. And Sam, you're the kind of guy that if you have to take a $60 fine to do the fine work that you do, you'll take that fine. And if I get a $60 fine working for the Blazing Musket, I'll be sure to send it over to you so you can take care of it for me.
Tom, for you, anything, man.
All right, Sam. Quickly here, do we have anything? Do we have any stories coming out on the Blazing Musket over the next couple days, over the next week that people are going to want to make sure to keep an eye on? And also, we have switched our platform, so if anyone is not aware of that switch and what that might entail, could you just let us know about that as well?
Yeah, so we announced a move earlier in the year, I believe early January. We got off of Substack. We had some readers. We had our founder, Steve Stower, kind of reach out. If you're not familiar with Substack, they're very very big on free speech. But when that happens, can attract the some people of the Nazi variety. So people want us to get off that. And I mean, if you want to even get more inside baseball, essentially when you have paid subscriptions on Substack, Substack takes 10% of that on top of a Stripe processing fee. That doesn't exist on our new platform, Ghost. They also don't have Nazis, so that's pretty cool. Um, Essentially, we were able to customize the site a little bit better, which is why you'll probably notice it looking a little different, a lot more customizable, greater functionality. And I mean, I can really tinker with things on a consistent basis rather than kind of being stuck into a format. So really excited for that. We got recommended a bunch by a bunch of different soccer sites, Sounders at Heart, Backheel's on there, Hudson River Blue, um, Big D Soccer, the SC Dallas soccer site is on there. So got recommended it, made the move. It seems like we make like one big move a year, in terms of how we kind of operate, and that was, our one this year. And then in terms of stories, I would say I recently did a story on BS Football Academy, which is owned by Brian Seagot. He is a uh former soccer player who was born to Brazilian parents, and he essentially, if you paid any attention to some of the top soccer players in Massachusetts and New England this year, that's where they were training. So it was essentially a story just kind of brewed out of my curiosity to be like, who are these guys training with and why are they training with them? But so I got to chat with him. I was really pleased with how that story came out. And I do, like I kind of mentioned earlier, have a story coming up. Don't know when it will come out. But I chatted with the folks from Kennedy Pickup Soccer. They kind of built up this pickup soccer community in New England to kind of talk about that community, Portland Hearts of Pine, and obviously how they've been dealing with the surge in ice activity that luckily has dwindled a little bit. So keep an eye on for that. We obviously will have a ton of Revs coverage. Jackie's killing it with Boston Legacy. Continuing to have Rhode Island FC and Portland Hearts of Pine coverage, building out the team covering Portland Hearts of Pine. Oliver's doing a great job with Hartford Athletic. And, we have a World Cup to cover, and I'm going to continue covering Vermont Green. So, plenty of stuff to keep you interested, no matter who you root for.
Excellent. All right. Well, Sam, thank you as always. Thank you for your continued work and leadership of the Blazing Musket, and we continue to be the best source for all of your soccer news and stories and analysis anywhere in New England. So please do continue to check out the website. Check us out on Ghost. If you're not a member, consider signing up to be a member. It's $5 a month. That supports all the great work that all the writers do. It also allows us to send people out to games to get photos, to get quotes, and that sort of great stuff. And it also does also help keep this podcast going as well. So it's not the most expensive thing in the world to run a podcast, but there are costs associated with it. So if you do really enjoy the Blazing Musket, if you enjoy this podcast, please do consider becoming a member of the site if you are not already. And of course, for this show, please continue to listen, to like, download, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts from. Sam, just once again, thanks for coming on. We look forward to having you on again very, very soon.
Thank you so much, Thomas.